All right, guys, welcome back to our September edition of the Agents to Agents panel. As you know, every month we get together and we discuss with real estate professionals on specific topics, and we cycle them every month. This month, our topic is 30 days in, what's going on with compensation and representation conversations, successes, challenges, lessons learned. We all get better together. And I want to welcome, first off, our panelists that are here with us today to share their knowledge and insight. All of them are near and dear friends to me, and I want to thank you all for being here today. As you know, on the Agents to Agents panel, this is live and we ebb and flow with the conversation as it goes. If you have a question that pops into your head, throw it in the chat. We want to ask your question. If you're curious about something, please throw it in there. But please remember, we have multiple brokerages that are here on this call. This is open to everybody. So please keep your questions and your conversation away from percentages, amounts, and numbers. If you do bring that up, I will mute you. If you do it again, I will boot you. So that's the way we're going to go with this. I'm going to start by introducing our panelists. If you guys can start with the lightning round, give a quick introduction of who you are, where you're from, and maybe something you're passionate about. Chris, kick us off.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Chris Krzemien. I am the broker owner of ReMax Experience. I am your 2024 District Vice President for District 11 for Florida Realtors, an NAR Director, as well as Chairman for Beaches MLS. What I am passionate about is education and professionalism, and making sure that we can all get together as one cohesive industry to share ideas and the pitfalls that we are experiencing, so we can all work together and play nice in the sandbox and have patience with each other while we all learn what is happening in this new normal.
That sounds like a lovely sandbox to me. Carrie, go ahead. Take us away.
Hey guys, how you doing? I'm Carrie Pietrowski. I'm the broker owner of LaRosa Realty Beaches. And I am also passionate about education and just collaboration. And I think that one thing that I've seen throughout this whole change in the industry is just agents working together from both sides. And that's how it was always supposed to be. And I'm truly blessed to be here today. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Carrie. And last but certainly not least, Doris.
Hello, everyone. I am locations broker for Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina. This same here, I passionate about getting across state lines, training where agents need to work together, and this has certainly helped facilitate that. So we have to talk to each other. It's great.
At the end of the day, we're people, right? We're not here to police each other. We're here to lift each other up and get through this transition together and all be better together. So we're going to go reverse order with our first question here. So Doris, you're on the hot seat. How have you seen clients respond to the changes in compensation negotiations?
So on the list side, it's really been pretty smooth sailing. Seems like sellers understand, especially in the current market too, that they're going to have to compensate. What you call it and what label you put on it, whether it's a concession or compensation, is kind of indifferent to the seller side, right? So it's a little bit different on the buy side. That has definitely spurred some conversations.
Yeah, at the end of the day, sellers care about their bottom line. What are they getting at the end of the day? I don't care who's getting money along the way. It's what is it into my pocket?
So,
go ahead, Doris.
Yeah, what we've been working on here is specifically training our agents to use that net sheet. To your point about the bottom line, start using that net sheet. If you haven't already, if that's not part of your business model, start doing it, because that's where it ends up. So yes.
Same question, Carrie. What are you seeing? How are clients responding to these compensation negotiations?
Yeah, I think that what we've seen in our office and me personally is some sellers are informed and kind of know what's going on and are ready to embrace the changes. Some they don't know anything. And some are wrongly informed. So they have been informed incorrectly. And so, of course, that's an opportunity for agents to educate that seller. It seems like all the buyers know about the changes, and I think that they're still eager to get into homes, just, with the new documentation. I think it's important that, again, education and just being able to present yourself and explain everything to them.
Thank you very much. And Chris, you're very much boots on the ground with your agents. You're a very hands-on broker, and I love that about you. What are you hearing?
So I have had a couple of conversations with sellers recently. I'm not a competing broker, but I do still sell sometimes, whether it be friend, family member, or a neighbor that I've gotten to know. So when talking to one of my neighbors who decided that they wanted to sell, they had no idea that there was any sort of NAR settlement in play. They had said, it's funny that you're presenting this to me in this way, because every house that I've sold in the past, I offered this and the broker split it. So it was simply a conversation that you had on the sell side. This is the way that we're doing things now, or at least this is the way that as a broker, I am doing things now to sort of get ahead of the curve. And it was just a very simple explanation to them. They realized that it was, six of one, half a dozen of the other. It really didn't make a difference to them whether they gave me all the money and I split it with another broker, or if they gave me two portions of money and one could collect one side and one could collect another side. So that conversation went super easy. Did have a property for another neighbor that ended up having 28 offers on it the other day. And that was a different story. You had some buyer brokers that were coming in asking for compensation, some of them that said, you don't have to worry about it, my buyer is covering me. So I want the buyer wants their offer to stand as is, with a different number that was going to have a different net for the seller. So some people have really grasped the changes. They know how to have those conversations with their buyers. And they presented their offers that were very, very smart offers, where they had the buyer paying them separately. I have had a lot of conversations with agents in my office that have had some struggles and some pitfalls in dealing with buyers that could not wrap their head around the fact that they were signing a document before they viewed a home. They also couldn't wrap their head around the fact that they were signing a document that said that they were going to owe a substantial sum of money based on their price point. So those conversations, when I first got into the business, would always happen in-house. You'd sit down in a conference room with a buyer, you'd have a conversation, you'd go through your documents. And I originally started working in a market where having a buyer agreement was certainly the norm. We worked as single agents and we had buyer agreements. So it is something new for a lot of places in the country, certainly new for all of us down here in South Florida. But it is going back to the old days where you'd sit down and have a buyer pre-consultation, find out if those people are even qualified to buy a home before you go and put them in your car, make sure that they understand how you're getting paid, what your role in the transaction is, articulating your value to that person. I, for one, am kind of excited that we're going back to something that was part of the old days that people really don't do anymore. Now it's just, you get a lead on the phone, you jump in your car, you're at a house, you've got no idea if they're going to buy that property from their sister or their mother-in-law, and you end up wasting your Sunday morning and not getting paid. I love the idea that my agents are working knowing that they are going to get paid at the end of that transaction and that their customer is not going to jump ship and buy it from somebody else. So I think those that are embracing it are really excited about it.
I have to agree. We've never had the ability to hold a buyer responsible to be loyal and trustworthy with that type of a relationship. Having the listing agreement on the buyer's side and keeping them accountable is a big positive out of it. Of course, it comes with new challenges and the ability or desire for a broker to sue a buyer. But that's just the trend in the marketplace we're going to see. So what would you say is a mistake or a lesson learned that you've heard from your agents that walk into a listing presentation and start getting diarrhea of the mouth and opening it up before the seller even brings it up as an issue? Carrie, let's have you start with that.
I think not being prepared, and I think now more than ever, if you as an agent, not you people here, but in general, if you don't have a rock solid buyer presentation and listing presentation, you've really got to take a step back and work on that, because now, just like Chris said, just communicating our value is more important than ever, and just not being prepared and not have practicing those conversations that maybe you haven't had so far in your business. If this wasn't something that you did before, is just really practice. And we're advising agents also come in and memorize a strong opening and a strong closing when you're talking about compensation. And then the middle can kind of work itself out because you can't plan an entire conversation. But I think those are some key points.
Yeah, definitely practicing that elevator pitch
Yeah.
I've had a number of agents kind of send me a script and say, here's what I plan to say, or here's what I'm sending to people. How does this sound? Should I tweak it at all? And perfecting that pitch when they walk in. So if it comes up, they have that script to go off of and they're confident and comfortable with it. Chris, how about you? What are some of the challenges or mistakes you're seeing from agents?
First off, I wholeheartedly agree with Carrie about that buyer presentation. People aren't used to having it. It is absolutely necessary because you're sliding a piece of paper across the table saying, this is how much money I'm working for on your behalf in order to get you to the closing table. And if you don't have a presentation that shows that you're worth that paycheck, people can go anywhere that they want to. So we've included a 100-step guide that we had, branded to the company, and it gives you the 100 points of what you are going to do for that buyer in order to get them to the closing table. But as far as mistakes that are being made in that initial conversation, I think that as practitioners, as realtor members, we've got this stuff pounded into our heads every day, all day long. I can't remember the last time that I have seen a news story based on the NAR settlement. It's one of those things that, it was hot that day and then it completely disappeared. We as the industry keep talking about it. Our customers are not subscribed to Inman. They're not subscribed to Riz Media. They're not subscribed to, real estate news and all these things. They're not paying attention to it. So we walk in and we start with this, oh, well, first off, let's talk about this compensation piece because I need to explain to you, da 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 da. No, don't do all that. Like, you've got your listing presentation. You guys are awesome at what it is that you do. Just go in there and pitch your listing presentation. If the customer decides, hey, you know what? I heard about this a couple months ago that I maybe don't have to pay you, or I maybe don't have to pay the buyer's agent, then go ahead and correct them. But don't lead off on having this talk about the NAR settlement, the sky's falling, commissions have all changed, all this stuff. Don't do that. Get out of that practice. They're not paying attention to it. We're the only ones that are.
Well said, Chris. Well said. We tend to put a microscope on things when others have no idea it even exists. Doris, how about you? Challenges and lessons learned you've heard from agents?
Yeah, so one of the challenges is not being prepared, like to Carrie's point, not walking in there with answers and not walking in there, with decent data to support everything. And you need to be able to prepare. I love what Chris was saying. Don't go in leading with this whole NAR thing.
Mm-hmm.
Half the people don't even know who the heck NAR is. The consumer don't know. So don't start with that, but be prepared. You have to have the answers when it does come. If you start struggling with answering that question, well, why is this changed or what's going on? You need to have answers. So, and that's, it goes back to being prepared. That's the bottom line there. That's the biggest pitfall. Now, I will say this, I got an interesting phone call from a consumer calling me irate. Well, I'm not going to sign this piece of paper. You all don't, I've bought many houses. You all don't ever ask me to pay up front, blah, blah, blah. Like, nobody's asking you to pay up front. We're asking you this. So I ended up walking her through explaining the changes to her and where it all came from. But what that shows is the agent was not prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a Georgian accent I heard coming out there?
She said, y'all.
Yeah, that y'all thing. I'm sorry. I apologize. My Floridian heart just starts bleeding over this stuff. So, but anyway, it was just the agent was not prepared and didn't put it in your buyer's presentation. Put an extra sheet in there with a chart explaining who and what's what. But clearly my agent missed it, is the bottom line, right? So
preparedness is definitely the name of the game. And some people don't know NAR, NRA, near, far, wherever you are, it doesn't matter.
Jonathan, I do have one more pitfall that I wanted to mention, which was really scary. This is something that I lost sleep over, and this is, part of the new norm is that a lot of realtors are set in their ways. New documents came out, new forms came out. We now have compensation agreements. That was not something that we had to deal with before. And I had one of my agents send over a compensation agreement and said, hey, is this okay to sign? We were on the listing side, they were on the buying side, and that buying side agent had sent over a compensation agreement that said that we owed X amount of money and it was on the second line of the compensation agreement. And this was from seller's broker to buyer's broker. So they were basically binding my company to paying out a certain amount of money. And without really reading what the buyer's agent had put into that line, had the buyer's agent had wrote, because they didn't read the document either and didn't realize what the blanks were for. So it ended up being a percentage of the purchase price plus not a transaction fee, but in that line said the purchase price. So they had bound one broker to pay the other broker the entire amount of the sale of the property, plus an additional percentage for what they thought was going to be their commission. So if you're an agent, if you're a broker, be watching those things like with the eye of a hawk. You go through them with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that you don't have mistakes like that in there. I can't imagine that any judge in all of the land would have thought that that's what we were actually intending to do, was buy somebody a home and then pay them for the privilege to do it. But certainly something that we need to watch closely, because these forms are new, and a lot of agents, we've been in a slower market. They may have not had the opportunity as of yet to use one of those forms. So for a lot of people, their next deal is going to be the first time, even though we're 30 days out. This might be the first deal that they've had in quite a few months, and we'll need to have help in filling out those documents properly. So just watch them closely.
Yeah, I had a circumstance come up where they went under contract prior to the 17th of August, and there was an offer of compensation in the MLS. And then, you go through the contract and all the stuff has changed, and you don't realize, or the listing broker didn't realize, that that offer of compensation was still valid on that deal. So there was a separate compensation agreement from seller to buyer's broker executed for an additional percentage. So not only at closing was the buyer's broker expecting to get that new compensation agreement percentage, but separately the percentage that was offered in the MLS. And it's now turned into an arbitration case for that additional amount. Turns out that additional amount was the only amount the listing broker was retaining. So if they are successful, that listing broker will have made zero. Be very careful with your paperwork. Use your broker, leverage your broker. They're the ones who are super educated and inside of things. Yes, Esther, that's the right file. I just got a private chat. She knows which deal it is. But be very careful with your paperwork to ensure that you're not over obligating your consumer or your brokerage or yourself in any of these agreements. So when we look at these changes and how they're going to impact different sectors of the marketplace, price point is definitely a big consideration. This is going to impact the lower price point, the mid price point, and the luxury market in different ways. Chris, I'm going to start with you. Have you seen any differences in how different market segments are responding to these changes?
I have actually seen that in the luxury market, the buyers are more than happy to pay their own buyer broker fee and negotiate something that is more of a flat fee model for the work that they are doing to make their cash offers a lot more attractive to the seller. So that way they can have their buyer's broker deny any sort of compensation that the seller might be offering in order to make their offer look a lot better when it is on that seller's net sheet. I have found that in the first time home buyer market that we're seeing, that my God, can't believe that now conventional loan limits are at 802,000. I just can't imagine that there's first-time home buyers that are spending that kind of money, but it's certainly happening. They are much more reliant on having their commission built in because they have worked a heck of a long time in order to save up their down payments, and they just don't have an extra however much money it is in order to pay their broker out of pocket. So they are when it comes down to the investor offer versus the first-time homebuyer offer, the first-time homebuyers pre-August 17th were able to stand their ground against some of the investors. But I'm seeing now that a lot of the investors are able to put forth offers that have no compensation in it whatsoever, and it's really starting to put the brakes on that first-time home buyer priced market. They're having a really hard time getting into the game, being up against so many investor offers.
Okay, Doris.
Seeing twofold, so there's part of the conversation between agents is now, hey, is your seller open to compensation? Then the next question is that built into the list price? Is your list price reflecting the seller paying compensation, or is it not? If it's not, then we see offers that are now based on that conversation. You have an above ask price offer with then asking for the seller concession / compensation to be paid. But that's a little bit of fact finding and the conversation between the agents, where you at, and sometimes it's the nuance is not enough that it's blatant to see which way was it priced. So that's been interesting conversations that we're having, and I'm seeing both things happening on that front.
Carrie?
Yeah, we've seen some challenges in our office with multifamily and the expectation of compensation that they're receiving at that level. But I'll also say that, you know, first time home buyers, again, just like Chris said, like, you know, they've been saving forever and they're finally to the point where they can purchase, but they're really not in a financial place to be paying buyer compensation. But then you have the buyer, which was very similar to a market that we were in 2 years ago, where there was a lot of buyers paying above appraised value in cash. They found that money then, and they're finding it now to pay their buyer's agents as well.
Yeah, something you guys all just mentioned there, actually, Chris, you alluded to this the most, was cash buyers, regardless of what level of the marketplace they're in at what price point. I'm seeing a trend. I'm at 5 now over the last 2.5 weeks of cash buyers who are peeling out compensation on both sides. They're willing to pay not only the buyer's compensation, the buyer broker compensation, but also the listing broker's compensation to remove it from the purchase price, thereby reducing closing costs on doc stamps and transfer taxes, but also on potential tax assessments on property taxes going forward. I think it's a really intelligent use of it, and a good tidbit for you guys to know for when you're working with cash buyers. So let's switch over. We've talked mostly about sellers. Let's switch over to the buyer side for a minute here. When going into the conversations regarding these representation agreements and the various formats that we can work with, what strategies have you found effective when discussing these representation agreements with buyers? Are you going full exclusive? Are you going per showing? What is your strategy? Doris, we're going to go back to starting with you.
Yes, so most of in Georgia we have a pre-showing agreement. So that's a difficult conversation. So most of our agents, I'm training them to do the buyer presentation. And within the buyer presentation, you address the compensation piece, get your buyer agency signed right off the bat, and then you go show property. That is really going back to what Chris is saying, the good old days. That's how it used to be, and that's how it should be. I mean, there's no place else where you just go start running and working for somebody without knowing what's what and who's supposed to do what. So it goes back to that. I think that is a good practice, and that's one that works. Agents trying to scramble and get pre-signed agreements, compensation agreements from the sellers, get them over to the buyer's agent. It's just not working. It's just a waste of time. It's not working. It's clunky and it's inefficient.
All right. Carrie?
Yeah, so I mean, our go-to best practice document is obviously the exclusive buyer broker agreement during a buyer consultation, getting that signed. I know that some of our agents who are working with online leads are working more with the showing agreement as far as showing properties. Those leads are not necessarily ready to sit down and have a full presentation, but we're trying to get our agents to go for the gold and just, you know, raise the professionalism in the marketplace as well.
Chris?
Yeah, I agree with both ladies. We start with a exclusive buyer brokerage agreement, have that conversation with the customer, let them know exactly what it is that we're going to be doing on their behalf in order to get them to the finish line, negotiate the best possible price and terms for what it is that they need. But if we get any pushback on something like that, then we have that conversation about, okay, you know what? We just met. We're on our first date. Why don't we start with a showing agreement? I'm going to list the properties that we are going to go out and tour today. You agree that by me showing you this property, you agree that you're going to give me a shot in order to negotiate that deal for you if you believe that that is one of the properties that is going to fit your needs. And if we get somebody who is very standoffish and just says, absolutely not, I do not want any sort of representation, all I need you to do is open that door for me, then obviously we use that property pre-touring agreement, almost like going out on a blind date with somebody, and see if it works out. If they call you back the next day, then you have a conversation with them and say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to work any longer on this property pre-touring agreement basis because there is nothing in there to say that after all of the days, which we're now on day 2 of me showing you properties, I'm prepared to spend the whole afternoon with you, but I need some sort of guarantee that if we're going to continue a relationship like this, that I am going to get paid. So we work on a graduating process. And now if you've gone in, you've worked with this person for a couple of weeks, you better get an exclusive buyer brokerage agreement signed just so that you don't have to keep going back and adding more and more and more properties to that agreement. Just make it for the county and go nuts with them.
So we have an amendment to those agency agreements in my state, in 2 of my states, where you sign the initial agreement, right? And you keep it broad, keep the term short, and then you amend the term once you come to terms that you're going to continue working together. You just amend that term to extend it to get actually to the closing table. So very, very similar. But also I wanted to point this out. Some of my agents, they're using Zoom. They buyer presentations on Zoom, or do a recorded, use a presentation, a PDF presentation, and email it to them, and then have a conversation. So it's not necessarily that we need to spend a lot of extra time on that buyer presentation.
So what's intriguing is, historically speaking, we didn't have these kinds of conversations with buyers. You were able to go meet them at a property, and some people did exclusive agreements beforehand, but it was a very small percentage of the marketplace. But you used to be able to meet a consumer at a property. You show that to them, you kind of feel each other out, and then you decide whether you're going to continue forward or not. And you may look at 10 properties before you do anything further. So now with these requirements, how are these representation agreement conversations and documents impacting the overall relationship between a buyer and their agent? Is it changing things for the positive where they feel more connected? Or is it creating more of a divide and you're kind of negotiating and fighting up front before you've been able to build a rapport with them? Carrie, what's your take?
Well, I think, that agents that are working with their sphere, I think that it's just creating that professionalism boundary that maybe wasn't there before when you're working with close friends and family. Like I mentioned before, I think what the challenge that we're seeing in our office is really those online leads that are calling you from, wherever, and they want to see the property now. It's harder to get them into that. But I think it's making our profession, like I said, just elevated professionally more. I think we're coming across in a different way. I think it's really important that the agents are able to start setting those boundaries that are so important when you're working with buyers, really from the very beginning, and start instead of having we need to have a conversation now. We've been working together for a few weeks, months, and I kind of feel taken advantage of with my time, etc. So I think they're all positive.
Okay, Chris?
I agree that they're positive. This is an exciting topic for me. Again, like just going back to the basics of things. So we're in this era now where all the stats show us that the average home buyer is spending, I can't remember the number of hours starting their home search online. They don't need our help. They don't want our help. They don't want to talk to anybody about any of this stuff. They're just out there. They've got a pipe dream of living that American dream and getting a roof over their head that they can call home. It's going to be their own. For a lot of people, it's like their first purchase, and people are purchasing that first home. In my opinion, it seems to be that they're getting a little bit older and older just because prices have gone up, interest rates have gone up, a little bit harder for people to get out from under mommy's wing. But I remember hiring my first realtor way back when, buying my first condo. I could remember how excited I was because I was the same. I started my search online. I was looking at some stuff, going to a couple open houses. I was a person that never wanted any of the realtors to talk to me because I felt like I was wasting their time. And but when I actually got to the point where I'm like, okay, I know my finances are in order. I've got my mortgage pre-approval. Now I can go out there and pick a realtor. And I walked into an open house and met this lady, and she was just so full of life and energy. We totally hit it off. We had a lot of stuff in common. And I ended up hiring her and went and sat down in her office and signed my buyer representation agreement. And I couldn't wait to call every single one of my friends and tell them that I had hired a realtor because it was a really cool experience. It's like you need somebody for something, and you have the ability to go and like hire this person that is working for you on an exclusive basis. You can call them, you can get all your info. They're giving you updates constantly. It was really the coolest thing. I was a young guy I didn't own a business. I didn't have people that worked for me, but now I had this realtor and I had an agreement with this realtor and they were like my own personal employee. And I thought it was really exciting. And I'm finding that even more so now because people are doing so much work out there on their own, finding their, getting all of their information together on what it is that they want. By the time that they make it to the realtor stage, they're excited to go on that journey with you. So having that conversation, articulating your value, pitching why it is that you're the best person to work with, that person's going to end up leaving you having this like great sense of pride that they are now becoming an adult and they're going to go and get their first house, and things like that. And I just think it's a really cool time to be in this profession, that we can now have those professional conversations with people, get them to hire you, and you no longer feel like a piece of meat that somebody's just going to use you and toss you to the side.
Doris, wrap up that question for us.
Yeah, it's the whole value proposition, I think, has helped a lot of agents question themselves, right? Before I can tell someone else, what do I do? What is my value? Why do I deserve to get paid? Wait a minute. So now that the fact that they had to put themselves through this process and ask themselves, why, what is it that I do? Why do I deserve to get paid? It's easier to articulate that. And it leads right into what Carrie was saying. It elevates our profession. It makes you more of a professional because now you're just more determined. You're more precise about what it is that you're going to do and how you're going to do it and when you're going to do it.
So the hot topic or the hot keyword that you hear is be prepared to demonstrate your value, portray your value. So I got this next question for you. Has the process of selecting your agent for a buyer really changed? Are they really interviewing multiple agents and going by value, or are they just signing an agreement with the first agent they start interacting with? Chris.
I've got one of those answers for you. It depends. It really does. It depends. You may have somebody who can't articulate their values. Somebody goes out, they sign a property pre-touring agreement. They go and view a few properties with that person and say, you know what? They're going to go and they're going to have a cocktail with their girlfriend that night and say, I met this agent and I don't know how I felt about the properties that we went and see. It didn't really feel like they were, giving me good vibes. And then they're going to say, hey, I've got a great person that I bought my house from. You should go and talk to them. And now they're going to go and have a conversation with somebody else. And you may have lost that buyer because you weren't prepared to articulate that value and they end up going somewhere else. But you know what? I think that's going to happen to a lot of us. Sometimes I could tell you that I'm, the best person in the world, and we go out and look at a few properties, and you just may not like the way that I walk or talk or whatever it is. That this is a very personal business that we're in, and if we just don't hit it off, that's cool. You'll hit it off with somebody else, but you know what? Somebody's going to talk to Carrie first. Sorry to call you out, Carrie, but they might not like Carrie's got blonde hair and they want to work with a boy instead, and they end up coming to me. We never know why people make these decisions. But certainly it is going to go round and round. The same way that when you try to get somebody to sign a buyer agreement, they might tell the first 3 agents, no, I'm not signing that. And then when they realize nobody's going to open the door, they sign with the 4th one. Well, you're going to end up being the 4th person sometimes. So for all the ones that you lose, there are going to be some that are coming back to you because of the exact same reasons that you lost that first one.
I like that. Doris?
Yeah, it is a people business. I don't think there is a one size fits all. You have personalities that jive, personalities that don't. I'd hate to say it, but some agents out there, they're used car salesmen, but it works. It works. Their numbers show that it works. So it depends. It really depends on how you click, how you connect. And I'm with Chris there. Sometimes you got to let it go. It's not worth it. If you don't force it. You want your clients to walk away and be happy. If it's not right at the beginning, it's not going to get any better.
I don't see it really changing anything. I mean, you go back when I wasn't a broker and I was selling myself, I never made people sign agreements with the mentality of if they don't want to work with me, I don't want to work with them. And now you just have a piece of paper you have to rip in half or cancel or modify if they want to go work with somebody else. But you are protecting yourselves along the way. Carrie, wrap that question up for us.
Yeah, I think the person that's going to be interviewing multiple agents is really that person that doesn't have a go-to realtor in their sphere, and the type of person that really is the person that like researches the car and does the like analyzes everything. I think that's the type of buyer that now they, you know, they know about the new changes in the industry. I think that type of buyer might interview several agents or line up a bunch of interviews, more like a listing presentation. But I do feel that, you know, as our agents do a tremendous amount of business off of sphere and referrals. And I think that those people they're going to get together with their friend. And I think it's still important that the agent makes the best presentation possible. But I think those people may not be shopping around. But I do want to say one thing too. I think it's important, as much as we're saying provide value and tell them what you can do and, you know, let them know, we've got to make it about them and not lose sight of that. And we've got to make it fun, because like Chris said, the whole experience is supposed to be this joyous occasion. And if we're coming in doom and gloom and this paperwork and these consequences and these boundaries, and we don't talk about the fun part of the journey and also talk about them, and remember to ask and listen more questions than just talk about yourself. I think that's important too. So
Agreed. Now this can be a really short answer from you guys. And Doris, I think you started, or Chris, you started the last one. So Doris, you're up. Has the requirement of these buyer agreements impacted the workload of an agent?
That's an easy question for me. No, because it's already been required in my states. So nothing new there, really.
Carrie?
I mean, I think there's a learning curve, but we're mastering them now. So I think it's just going to be second nature. I try to tell our agents, remember when you were new and you just started and you were like, there's office disclosures and what's this one? And then there's this, and it's just a matter of getting used to them. But ask about the broker workload has gotten a little bit more. We don't have a representative in our office that signs anything but myself. So that's been a little fun. So
yeah, we were in Orlando at the end of August, right when the changes were being implemented. And Chris, I think I had this conversation with you while we were there. And I said, this has been the busiest 3 weeks in my 17 years in real estate. And it's not that there's that many problems. It's not that there's doom and gloom or there's anything that catastrophic happening, but the sheer volume of how brokers have to be split in educating one-on-one every single agent, the time intensity is absolutely astounding. Yeah, Chris, why don't you hit the rest of that question?
So I would say for newer agents, they're still absorbing all this information. So you say, I want you to use, you know, these forms, attach those to your offer. Very easy for somebody like that. For the older agents that have been in the business for a long time and they just want to fire things off because they're so used to, you know, being really, really quick with their work. And then you have to stop them and say, whoa, include this into your additional terms, or add FF as the addendum, and then do this, this, and this. And you need to add, you know, your compensation agreement to your offer when you're presenting it. Those older agents are not happy that the cheese has been moved, and they get really frustrated really quickly. But they're all getting into the swing of things now. But you're right. It is just labor intensive as a broker, because you're constantly answering your phone to tell them which form to use and what wording they should be putting in those things. So that's it. But we're going to get through it. It's fine.
Yeah, my hairline does not thank these NAR changes, I'll tell you that. Now, technology has always been a big impact or a differentiator when it comes to residential real estate, especially on how different agents leverage that on various aspects of their business. With everything going on, do you see any technological advancements or tech programs that are helping agents adjust or present things in a different way for their consumers? Carrie, I'll start with you.
So I don't know. I think this part of this industry, and especially with the changes we had in our industry in general, is just such a personal person to person. I don't know how much technology can really fill in these gaps right now, at least not right now. I don't come from like an inventor type mindset. And so I would be interested to see if there's any really technology out there that's making this any easier. I think it's just person to person, and just like we've all said, communication and old school, sitting across from someone and picking up the phone and talking to people on Zoom or in person, whatever it is, and communicating. So I'm not sure about that question.
Chris?
I think that there's going to be a lot of, we already are seeing new technologies coming out, certain platforms, apps that are there, and I think that they're going to be short-lived. Some of these commission negotiation platforms and things like that that are starting to come out are you know, they're all the buzz right now, but I think that once people realize that you're just simply not going to do things the old way, and they're going to get into a new groove of doing things in a different way, those are just going to end up disappearing. I do think that there are going to be new platforms that pop up that are going to be trying to take the agent out of the transaction, and you know, you just put in how much you want to offer for a house and the purchase price, and boom, it's going to spit out an offer that you could just send yourself to the listing agent and try to represent yourself. Things like that are going to continue coming down the pike, but the value of the realtor is never going to go away. You know, that there is going to be a point in that transaction where they go, oh, I didn't realize that I needed to have my deposit in within 3 days. Oh, I didn't realize that I only had this much time for my inspection. So I think once the public realizes that they, not that all we are, you know, reminders that send somebody an email, say, or, you know, give them a phone call and say, hey, your deposit's due. I think that there's a lot of things that happen throughout the course of a transaction that no program is going to be able to replace us with. So I think that the realtor is still going to remain essential and at the center of that transaction, regardless of what technology comes out.
Doris?
Yeah, I want to double down on what Chris said. You know, it's one of the things that, as far as our value proposition, what do you do as a realtor? We're not selling homes. We're here to navigate you through the process, right? So that's a service that we provide. And I think that in itself is invaluable. So you can't replace that with people have families. There's conversations that you have along the way with your clients. You can't replace that with the technology. I just don't see it. There now, on the more practical side, for form application, I call a huge win. I had one of my agents who was still writing contracts by hand. He decided this form was too much. He is now going to use technology. He's going to use Remind. So this is on the lighter side, but you know, at the same time, I see a lot of individual brokerages that have their own apps. And I think that does nothing but confuse agents, because you have so-and-so has this app and so-and-so has this app, and we want you to download our app, and this one you have to go log in online and make your appointment, and you need to create an account. I'm like, I'm over it. I want to show your property. Not so some of those I think are just nuisance at this point.
Where I do see an opportunity for technology, and it really depends on the market we're in, whether we're in a buyer's market or a seller's market. But Chris, with your neighbor, which number one, I'm curious why you have so many neighbors that are selling their homes. Are you a bad neighbor? But in a circumstance like you had, you mentioned 28 offers on a property, which we haven't seen since the pandemic boom. You know, you're not seeing those massive multiple offer situations in today's market, but we're shifting right now where, you know, previously sellers could go on market, hold an open house and have 25 offers. And that's not really the case right now. But when you have multiple offers coming in more of a seller style market, an offer management platform or finding a technology leveraging offer management where you can compare different line items within the offers of sales price, deposits, inspection periods, loan periods, et cetera, as well as compensation or concessions that have been requested to get the seller the bottom line. It's essentially a side-by-side net sheet or a platform that kind of translates it and helps you illustrate what the actual offerings are. I think that's going to be a useful one. And there are some that are coming on and about and kind of tracking what an agent does to show how much you truly do in a transaction, more than showing a home, writing an offer, and then going to a closing table to collect a 5 or 6 figure commission check. It's demonstrating how much we truly do behind the scenes for that. Maybe that becomes a trend. I don't really know. That remains to be seen. Let's go with a little bit more of a fun question here. Starting with Chris, what has been the most surprising circumstance you've heard from an agent or a client, maybe requesting something or saying something that is just so unfounded, something surprising you've received from a client or an agent about these changes?
And specifically to the changes. Well, the silliest thing that I have heard so far is that they heard on the news that realtors cannot get paid a commission any longer. So they expected that the realtor was actually going to go and spend all this time working for them for free. And they had a conversation with them saying, well, where do you think I'm getting paid from? And they said, you could get paid from your broker. that I thought was pretty shocking, that people are hearing things in the news and don't even process or comprehend how we get paid, the way that, you know, real estate is transacted. And they felt empowered to basically to have this attitude that we did not deserve to get paid, and somebody outside of the transaction should be paying us. I thought that was an interesting one.
Doris?
I can't top Chris's. I'm sorry. That's crazy. No, I don't have one.
Carrie?
I did have an agent in my office who, you know, as we mentioned, sort of missed the mark in being able to, you know, educate her buyer about the buyer broker agreement. And what happened was that there was going to be some compensation, a good amount of compensation coming from the seller, but she had disclosed a different number. And so there was a small gap that the buyer was going to chip in, and was happy to do that, and explain to me on the phone that, you know, the wonderful agent and deserved this amount of money in total that she was going to get, but had a problem with that we weren't going to change the number on the exclusive buyer broker agreement to match the small amount that buyer was kicking into the transaction. And so I also, you know, got on the phone, was trying to explain. It turned into a 5-way conversation with not only the buyer's husband, the wife, there was a grandmother and an uncle, someone claiming to be an attorney. And at the end of it, they were threatening to call an attorney on me and also turn me into the realtor board. And I was like, please call them, because they're going to say kind of the same thing that we are. So it was just shocking to hear that they had such a fear and a distrust in what was happening, that they weren't able to overcome that. And I'll tell you that they were past the point of getting their deposit back, and because we wouldn't change the documentation, they were happy to forfeit the deposit and not move forward with the home, which I think is wild. Yeah.
Interesting. That reminds me of a buyer I had who wanted to prey on the decision, and ended up overgoing a deadline and losing their deposit because they couldn't make a decision. The funniest story I had, actually, and I enjoy these, I was arguing with an attorney. And that attorney thought that sellers and listing brokers were not allowed to compensate buyers brokers at all, that it was no longer allowed, and the buyer had to pay it. So that attorney got another attorney and got another attorney. It turned into a 4-way call, 3 attorneys and me, and got this guy to change his tune and educate his title company of about 12 people. So it goes back to what Chris said in the beginning. It's not about policing each other. It's about holding each other up, getting better education across the board, and we'll all move forward with this together. So really interesting aspect from there. Miseducation is probably the biggest hurdle that we have to overcome, regardless of consumer, agent, broker, title, lender. It's all kind of the same thing. So I don't think we have many brokers in here, so I'm not going to go down that pathway. How has the settlement changes or new negotiation conversations impacted your brokerage policies with these new requirements? Are there new requirements of everything has to get signed through the broker? Are you allowing agents to change that? Are you allowing agents to decide how they're going to adjust or address marketing for a specific property, concessions versus compensation? How's that looking for you? Doris, we'll start with you.
Well, you know, we have different with my different states. There is nuances with each state, so I can't kind of uniformly answer that one.
Okay. Carrie?
Well, we rewrote all of our policy and procedures and created you know, more flow charts and more checklists. And if, you know, we have our own what is it? The Q&A, not a Q&A.
FAQ.
Yes, thank you. We have all those uploaded into our system now too for extra checks and balances. But yeah, we redid our entire policy and procedure manual to incorporate all the changes. And then we are a franchise, but we have the ability in my office to follow the franchise policy, but then also to create a separate one within, which we did as well. We made some additional changes to just what our office is doing compared to the brand.
Chris?
We had to make a lot of changes actually to the policies and procedures manual, and it's this, constantly evolving document that we have to keep adding to as new scenarios come up. For example, we had to change because authorized associate was fine in pre-August 17th. Authorized associates are no longer allowed here at my company. But that's really only on the seller's broker to buyer's broker compensation forms. If somebody's signing a listing, obviously we let them go ahead and do things like that. Or the seller to buyer's broker form, but certainly that we don't want to have anybody tying my company to any sort of obligation. Then, things like in regards to if you're filling out a buyer brokerage agreement, you're charging somebody a retainer fee. What happens to that retainer fee? If that retainer fee is paid, is that agent commission? How is that, exactly what is done with those fees? And, does it go on a split and all that sort of thing? And then as well, what happens with agents that are out there working without written buyer agreements? If there were to be any sort of lawsuit, they need to know that the company's not going to be responsible for their attorney fees if they're out there running rogue and not doing exactly what we are telling them to do per our policies and procedures. And then you had, it's funny because I was putting some new things on my list today in that regard for the attorney's fees, retainer fees. There were a couple other things that is escaping my mind that I just uploaded yesterday, but certainly there's changes. Oh, how long they need to keep their buyer broker agreements or whatever written buyer agreement that they have. Is that turned into the company offer management system? We were going to say as soon as you get those things signed, put them into the system, but then we said, you know what? It is your responsibility to hold those documents until you get that buyer under contract, at which time that you create your deal in the system, you're going to upload your written buyer agreement. And if you end up working for that person for a long time and that never comes to fruition, just keep those documents, in your files for 5 years in case, the association ever calls upon you to, as a broker, to submit those documents to them for verification. We want to make sure that you've got a copy of that saved to your computer.
Let's talk about the path forward. Anytime there is a change in any industry or any profession, there is some type of opportunity that is created. What do you think is the best opportunity for a realtor with this new way of doing business? Carrie.
The best opportunity.
That wasn't on my list of questions, so you had no time.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. No, but I think, like I said, we've all said it. I think it's an amazing opportunity for us to not go into the workplace and be showing buyers properties and not getting paid. I think it creates a level of professionalism for us. One of my favorite quotes is, "You can't manage what you don't measure." I think it's making all of us really take a look at the statistics that we're measuring and including new stats. Like, you guys talked about like how many people are calling and asking for compensation. How many days on market are listings staying on the market that are offering X, and how many are staying on the market when they're only offering Y, and vice versa. So I think it's an opportunity for us to really kind of look at those statistics as well.
Chris? The biggest opportunity that we all have in front of us right now is to make money. I'm telling you, I'm absolutely loving the fact that we are putting people into contracts to say, if I'm going to go and do the work, you're going to pay me. Yep. Somebody's going to pay me. And I think that is absolutely fantastic. The other opportunity that you have is some people are getting so frustrated with the changes that they are going to leave the business. So there is the opportunity for us agents that are seasoned, the ones that are paying attention, the ones that are adapting to these changes and really embracing the new way of doing things, articulating that value. I think I've said 100 times already. Those agents that are in it to win it are going to be gobbling up market share from those people that just don't know how to adapt to change.
Well said. Doris?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to force us to communicate agent to agent. It's going to force us to communicate with the public. It's going to make us appear more professional. It raises the bar for our whole industry. And I love what Chris was saying yes, we will weed out the ones that aren't willing to change and the ones that aren't willing to learn and work through this. So that's a good thing.
So we have just under 2 minutes left here. Actually, we have about 1 minute. So I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to leave your best piece of advice for the people that are listening here today on something that you want them to have in their mind as they enter the marketplace again tomorrow. Every day we wake up unemployed, but I don't think that's the case anymore, since every time we sign a buyer rep agreement, we've got an opportunity to make money. So Chris, what is the last piece of advice that you want to leave for our viewers here?
Have patience with each other. This is all new to everybody. There's some of us that have been in this day in and day out because we've been in scenario planning, strategizing. We're so deep into the changes that it's easy for us to tell other people about it. It's not as easy for other people to understand what it is that we are telling them. So have a lot of patience in this market. I've heard of a lot of fights that are happening between two agents, but you have to understand what Carrie is teaching her agents to do in that transaction is different from what I am teaching my agents to do, different from what Doris is teaching her agents to do. So when those two agents come together, remember that we're all trying to get to the finish line. We've got a buyer that wants to buy. We've got a seller that wants to sell. Let's communicate with each other. And if Jonathan had told his people to do it differently than how I have told my people to do it, let's get the brokers to talk to each other, and then we can articulate as brokers to our agents, this is what I meant when I was telling you to do it this way. And then Doris can tell her agent, this is what I meant when I was trying to tell you to do it this way. You and Chris's agent are actually seeing eye to eye. You guys are just not hearing each other, hearing each other out and hearing what each other is trying to say. So just have patience. Let's uplift each other. Let's work together towards a common goal and try to make life easier for the agent that is on the other side.
Doris?
It's terrible to have to go talk after Chris. He always takes the words right out of my mouth, but it is a big deal that communication and the patience. You have to understand that the agents out there have a different level of knowledge and different training from their brokerages, and some have no knowledge, and they're in different phases of their careers. So be patient, communicate, work together. At the end of the day, yes, it's about your client. Work it out.
Carrie, wrap up the last round here, and then I'll close with some comments.
I mean, I would love to talk more of just what they were saying, because I truly believe in that and the collaboration and teamwork. But I will also say that I think this is a really important time for any agent, no matter where you are in your business, to look at your presentations, take a step back. And if you never really created that awesome listing presentation, do that now. Really figure out how to communicate your value. And what we're telling the agents, the ones that are showing that frustration of like, how am I ever going to get paid as a buyer's agent again? Another agent's going to have a different mindset, and they're going to go out and they're going to make more money as a buyer's agent than they ever did, because now we're not only relying on whatever was on the MLS. You have a new golden opportunity, and someone else is going to go out there and crush it and get whatever it is that they think they deserve on a regular basis. And if that agent can do it, anybody can do it.
I love it. Sound advice from sound professionals. Completely agree with everything that you guys have said. I want to thank our panelists again. We'll be back in October with a fresh set of panelists, and we will be talking about mindset and planning into the fourth quarter next month. So I've got a couple coaches and motivational guys that are coming on for next month. It's going to be exciting. Lots of input, lots of advice, and I assure you, lots of ego. So I will see you guys next month. If you registered, you will get a recording of this. And from the bottom of my heart, Carrie, Chris, and Doris, thank you so much for sharing and being an open book. I hope everybody walked away with some tidbits, and we'll see you guys next month. Thank you.